There exists a water spirit whose image has traveled through time and across oceans, whose worship predates recorded history, yet whose most iconic form emerged from the most unexpected source: a 19th century German circus poster. She is known by many names across the African continent and its diaspora, but most commonly as Mami Wata, Mother Water. Her story represents one of the most fascinating examples of cultural convergence in human history, a living mythology that has absorbed influences from ancient African cosmology, European colonialism, Hindu iconography, and the traumatic Middle Passage, yet remains distinctly and powerfully African. To understand Mami Wata is to understand how beliefs evolve, how cultures collide and merge, and how spiritual practices survive even the most brutal attempts at erasure. She is simultaneously ancient and modern, indigenous and foreign, benevolent and terrifying. She promises wealth to her devotees while demanding sacrifices that can destroy families. She appears as a seductive mermaid in some traditions, a snake charmer in others, and sometimes as a fully human woman of otherworldly beauty. In coastal regions from Senegal to Mozambique, in the Caribbean islands, in the favelas of Brazil, and in African American communities throughout the United States, her presence continues to be felt, her rituals performed, her images venerated. What makes Mami Wata particularly intriguing is that unlike many ancient deities whose origins fade into mythology, we can actually trace specific moments when her iconography transformed, when new elements were absorbed into her worship, when she crossed geographical boundaries and acquired new characteristics. Her story is one that academic scholars like Henry John Droual have spent decades documenting, yet it remains a living, present happening, breathing tradition that continues to evolve. Before we can understand how a Samoan woman performing with snakes in Hamburg, Germany, came to represent an African water goddess, we must first journey back to the ancient spiritual landscape of Africa itself, where water spirits have been worshipped for millennia. Long before European ships appeared on African shores, the people of the continent understood water as sacred. Rivers, lakes, and oceans were not merely physical resources but living entities, the dwelling places of powerful spirits who controlled fertility, wealth, health, and the boundary between the world of the living and the realm of the dead. These beliefs were not uniform across the vast African landscape. Each region, each ethnic group, each river system had its own traditions, its own names for the spirits who resided in the depths. The Dogon people, whose astronomical knowledge has long fascinated scholars, included in their creation mythology beings they called the Namos, creatures described as half-human, half-fish, or half-reptile, who descended from the star system Sirius and brought knowledge and cosmic order to humanity. Dogon oral tradition suggests awareness of these beings stretches back more than 4,000 years, making them among the oldest documented mermaid-like entities in human mythology. These were not romantic fairy tale creatures, but profound cosmic beings responsible for establishing the very foundations of civilization, law, and spiritual practice. In the Ethiopian Coptic language, linguistic scholars have identified ancient words that may relate to water spirits. Mama signified truth and wisdom, while Wat meant ocean water. In early Sudanese societies, Wata referred to woman, suggesting a possible linguistic lineage for the name we now know as Mami Wata, though this etymology remains contested among scholars. What cannot be contested is the widespread presence of water spirit worship throughout the African continent long before any contact with European cultures. Among the Igbo, Ibibio, and Efik peoples of southeastern Nigeria, numerous water spirits populated rivers and coastal regions. Some appeared as fish-tailed beings, others as serpents or crocodiles. Many of these spirits were distinctly feminine, conceived as powerful goddesses who controlled not just the physical waters, but also pregnancy, childbirth, and the mysterious fertility of both land and womb. These spirits were approached with elaborate rituals. Offerings were made at specific times, and taboos regulated when one could fish, sail, or approach sacred waterways. To violate these spiritual protocols could result in devastating floods, failed harvests, or personal tragedy. The Mende people of Sierra Leone and neighboring regions knew of Tingoi, also called Njolai, a water spirit comparable to a mermaid with the upper body of a woman and the lower body of a fish. Muslim Mende peoples incorporated her into their cosmology as a female jinn, a spirit being that exists in Islamic theology. This syncretism demonstrates how African water spirit beliefs proved adaptable, absorbing new religious frameworks while maintaining their essential character. The elaborate Soe masks used in Sande society initiations reference these water spirits, connecting them to female power, secret knowledge, and the transformation of girls into women. What united these diverse traditions was the recognition that water spirits embodied duality. They were nurturers and destroyers, healers and killers, providers of abundance and bringers of drought. This fundamental ambivalence reflected the nature of water itself in African life, absolutely essential for survival, yet capable of devastating floods. The spirits who controlled these waters naturally possessed this same dual nature, and approaching them required careful attention to ritual protocol, proper offerings, and respectful behavior. This ancient understanding would later merge with new influences to create the complex figure we now call Mami Wata. The most iconic modern image of Mami Wata, the one reproduced on countless prints, carved into wooden sculptures, painted on glass, and displayed in temples throughout Africa, has a thoroughly documented and utterly unexpected origin. Around the year 1887, in the bustling port city of Hamburg, Germany, an entertainment entrepreneur named Karl Hagenbeck was revolutionizing European popular culture with what he called Volkerschauung, literally, people shows. Exhibitions that presented exotic peoples from around the world to curious European audiences. These were problematic enterprises by any contemporary ethical standard, essentially human zoos that fed colonial-era fantasies about primitive peoples, but they were enormously popular and profitable. Hagenbeck had connections throughout the colonial networks. He employed hunters and collectors who traveled to distant lands, acquiring not just animal specimens, but also people willing to perform their native customs for European crowds. One such employee, a hunter named Breitwieser, traveled to Southeast Asia and the Pacific Islands, and he returned not just with rare snakes, insects, and butterflies, but with a wife. This woman would perform under the stage name Maladamachut, though her true identity remains somewhat mysterious even today. Some sources identify her as Samoan, suggesting she came from the Pacific Islands. Others claim she was actually a French woman named Emily Poupon, also known as Nala Damajanti, who had performed as a snake charmer with P.T. Barnum's Circus in the United States. The uncertainty itself is revealing. She was considered exotic enough that her actual origins mattered less than the fantasy she represented. What we know with certainty is that she posed for studio photographs in Hamburg around 1887, dressed in an elaborate costume with multiple large snakes draped around her body and neck. These photographs were then transformed into chromolithographic posters by the Adolf Friedlander Printing Company, which specialized in colorful circus and entertainment advertisements. The posters were works of art in their own right, using the latest printing technology to create vibrant, eye-catching images. Maladamachut appeared on these posters from approximately the mid-thigh upward, wearing an ornate costume with a distinctive striped bodice decorated with buttons, coins around her waist, elaborate jewelry on her arms, and serpents positioned dramatically around her neck and shoulders. She held what appeared to be a snake charmer's flute in her hands and gazed directly at the viewer with an expression that conveyed both mystery and confidence. The posters were distributed throughout Hamburg and other European cities to advertise Hagenbeck's shows. And this is where the story takes its fascinating turn toward Africa. Hamburg was one of Europe's largest and busiest ports, a hub where ships from around the world docked, where sailors from every nation congregated, and where goods and ideas flowed between continents. African sailors, working on merchant vessels passing through Hamburg, encountered these circus posters. Perhaps they purchased them as souvenirs, or perhaps they simply took abandoned advertisements. Regardless of how they acquired them, these sailors brought the posters back to West Africa. By the year 1901, a mere 14 years after the poster's original publication, British colonial agent J.A. Green photographed a ceremonial water spirit headdress in the town of Bonny in Nigeria's Niger River Delta region. This headdress unmistakably incorporated elements from the German circus poster. The long black hair parted in the middle, the distinctive neckline of the garment, the positioning of the arms and serpents. Even a carved relief showing a figure with a flute surrounded by snakes. In just over a decade, a Samoan or French woman performing in a German circus had been transformed into an African water divinity, her image carved into wood and incorporated into sacred ritual objects. The speed and thoroughness with which this German poster became associated with African water spirits demands explanation. It was not simply that Africans saw an exotic foreign image and randomly adopted it. Rather, the poster arrived in a cultural context that was already primed to receive and interpret it in specific ways. The image of Maladamachaut possessed several elements that resonated deeply with existing African spiritual concepts. First, snakes. Serpents had long been associated with water spirits in many African traditions. They were creatures that moved between land and water, that could swim through rivers and disappear into hidden places. They represented transformation, shedding their skin to be reborn, and mysterious knowledge. Python cults existed throughout West Africa, with the python considered a sacred creature associated with divination, healing, and spiritual power. When Africans saw a woman intimately associated with multiple large snakes, controlling them rather than fearing them, this immediately suggested supernatural power of a type they understood. Second, the poster's composition left Maladamachaut's lower body to the viewer's imagination. She was shown from the thighs up, with the bottom of the poster fading into abstract space. While a small inset image on some versions of the poster showed her with human legs, this detail could be easily overlooked or reinterpreted. In a culture that already conceived of water spirits as having fishtails or serpentine lower bodies, it was natural to imagine that this powerful woman continued downward as a mermaid. The poster inadvertently provided a perfect template for existing beliefs. Third, her foreignness. Mami Wata, in virtually all her African manifestations, is understood as coming from elsewhere, from across the ocean, from foreign lands, from the realm of the dead or the spirit world. She is consistently described as light-skinned, often depicted as white or with racially ambiguous features. This foreignness is not incidental but central to her power. During the colonial period and the centuries of Atlantic trade that preceded it, goods and power increasingly came from overseas, from Europe and other distant places. Africans associated wealth, modern technology, and new possibilities with foreign origins. A beautiful foreign woman, clearly wealthy and powerful enough to control dangerous serpents, embodied this complex relationship with the foreign and the modern. For African men, particularly those who had traveled as sailors or merchants, and thus encountered European and global cultures, displaying the image of Maladamachaut may have served as a marker of worldliness and sophisticated connections. but she also tapped into much older spiritual understanding. The poster allowed Africans to visualize, in a new way, the ancient water spirits their ancestors had always known existed. It provided a specific, reproducible image for beings that had previously existed primarily in oral tradition and more abstract representations. The story of Mami Wata's iconography took another remarkable turn in the mid-20th century, demonstrating once again her capacity to absorb and integrate diverse cultural influences. By the 1930s, and continuing through the 1950s, Lebanese and Indian merchants had established significant trading presences in West Africa, particularly along the coast from Ghana to Nigeria. These merchants brought with them not just commercial goods, but cultural artifacts, devotional images, religious prints, films, and illustrated books depicting Hindu deities and sacred figures. African devotees of Mami Wata began to notice remarkable similarities between their water spirit and certain Hindu goddesses. Both traditions featured beautiful divine women associated with water, fertility, and prosperity. Both used serpent imagery extensively. Both involved elaborate ritual worship, including offerings, music, and dance. Rather than seeing these as mere coincidences, Mami Wata worshippers engaged in what anthropologists call creative syncretism. They interpreted the Hindu images as different manifestations or relatives of Mami Wata, expanding their understanding of her into a more complex cosmology. A Yoruba devotee interviewed by scholar Henry John Druell explained the process. Formerly, during the colonial period, we had the pictures, but we didn't know their meaning. People just liked them to put them in their rooms. But then Africans started to study them too. About what is the meaning of these pictures that they are putting lights, candles, and incense there every time. This quote reveals a sophisticated process of religious inquiry and interpretation, not passive adoption, but active theological investigation. Then, in the 1950s, merchants in Ghana, possibly of Indian origin themselves, recognized a business opportunity. They took one of the remaining German circus posters of Maladamachot and sent it to the Sri Ram Calendar Company in Bombay, India, requesting reproductions. The calendar company obliged, creating mass-produced prints that were far more affordable and accessible than the original lithographs or hand-painted images. These Indian printed calendars flooded West and Central Africa, becoming the primary visual reference for Mami Wata. Scholar Henry John Druell estimates that this single poster image, reproduced by an Indian calendar company, influenced how Mami Wata has been visualized in at least 20 African countries. The prints appeared in homes, shrines, temples, and marketplaces. Artists used them as models for carved sculptures, painted images, and ceremonial objects. The standardization of her image through mass production actually facilitated the spread of her worship, as people across vast distances now shared a common visual reference. The Hindu influence extended beyond just the reproduction of the poster. Elements of Hindu iconography began appearing in original African artworks depicting Mami Wata. Sculptures and masks from Sierra Leone and other regions show water spirits wearing the bindi, the decorative mark on the forehead associated with Hindu traditions. Some representations incorporated multiple arms, a common feature in Hindu deity depictions. Mami Wata temples began to display Hindu prints alongside African spiritual objects, not because worshippers confused the two traditions, but because they recognized meaningful connections and complementary spiritual truths. The creation of Papi Wata, a male counterpart to Mami Wata in some West African traditions, directly reflects Hindu influence. Papi Wata is often explicitly modeled on Hanuman, the Hindu monkey deity. Images of Hanuman circulating in Africa were reinterpreted as a male water spirit, companion or consort to Mami Wata. This demonstrates the theological creativity of Mami Wata devotees. Rather than rigidly maintaining tradition, they actively incorporated new elements that resonated with their understanding of spiritual reality. Mami Wata defies simple categorization because she appears in remarkably diverse forms depending on region, cultural context, and individual vision.
In Nigeria, she is frequently depicted as a classic mermaid, a woman's upper body seamlessly transitioning into a fish's tail covered in glittering scales. These mermaid representations emphasize her connection to rivers, lakes, and coastal waters. Carved wooden figures show her holding the iconic mirror and comb, the mirror representing the boundary between the physical and spiritual worlds. The surface of water itself, the ability to see one's true self or future. The comb speaks to her legendary beauty, her long flowing hair, that devotees consistently describe as one of her most enchanting features.
In other regions, particularly following the spread of the German circus poster, she appears as a snake charmer, a woman in human form from head to toe but intimately associated with serpents. Large snakes coil around her torso, rest their heads on her breasts, wrap around her arms and neck. The snakes are not threatening her, but obey her commands, demonstrating her mastery over dangerous forces. This snake charmer manifestation emphasizes her connection to divination and hidden knowledge, as serpents in many African traditions are associated with ancestral wisdom and the ability to perceive truths hidden from ordinary mortals. Some representations show Mami Wata as entirely human in appearance, but distinguished by her extraordinary beauty. Her light skin, often described as white or pale, and her possession of foreign luxury goods. She wears modern clothing, elaborate jewelry, expensive fabrics. She carries mirrors, cosmetics, perfumes, consumer goods associated with wealth and global trade. This version of Mami Wata reflects her role as what scholars have called a capitalist deity, a spiritual being whose power increased precisely during the period of growing global commerce, and whose blessings manifest primarily as material prosperity. The colors associated with Mami Wata carry profound symbolic weight. Red and white appear consistently across different regional traditions. The objects she carries tell their own story. The mirror, beyond its symbolism as water's surface and self-reflection, also represents Mami Wata's connection to modern commerce. Mirrors were valuable imported items in Africa, symbols of foreign trade and wealth. The comb similarly represents both her feminine beauty and the civilizing influence she can bring, grooming and ordering that which is wild and chaotic. When she appears with jewelry, especially coins, beads, and elaborate ornaments, this emphasizes her ability to grant material prosperity to faithful devotees. In some traditions, particularly in Central Africa, Mami Wata can also manifest as a crocodile, a form that emphasizes her dangerous aspect. Crocodiles lurk beneath the water's surface, powerful predators that can drag the unwary to their deaths. This manifestation reminds worshippers that Mami Wata's gifts always come with potential costs, that approaching her requires respect and caution. Similarly, some accounts describe her as part serpent, not merely associated with snakes, but herself serpentine below the waist, her scales catching light like fish scales or snakeskin. Regional variations abound. Among the Iwi people of Ghana and Togo, she is primarily understood as a granter of wealth and protection. Among the Igbo of Nigeria, her connections to fertility and reproduction receive greater emphasis. In Angola and the Congo, her powers as both healer and punisher of those who violate spiritual laws take precedence. Yet despite these variations, certain core characteristics remain consistent. Her extraordinary beauty, her connection to water, her dual nature as both beneficent and dangerous, her foreign origins, and her association with prosperity and transformation. Mami Wata is not a deity who offers unconditional blessings.
Unlike the distant, inscrutable gods of some traditions, she engages in what can only be described as contracts with her devotees, agreements that bring tremendous benefits, but require sacrifices that can upend one's entire life. Understanding these covenants is essential to grasping both her appeal and the fear she inspires. The most common gift Mami Wata offers is wealth. Devotees report sudden improvements in their business fortunes, unexpected windfalls, new opportunities for profitable trade. She is particularly associated with commercial success, not the wealth of farming or traditional crafts, but the money that comes from trade, modern business, and engagement with the cash economy. This makes sense given her historical context. Mami Wata's worship intensified during precisely the period when African economies were being increasingly integrated into global capitalist systems. She represents a spiritual response to economic transformation, a way of navigating new forms of wealth and power. But wealth from Mami Wata comes with conditions. The most frequently reported requirement is sexual faithfulness, not to a human partner, but to Mami Wata herself. Men who encounter her, whether in dreams, visions, or near-death experiences at sea, often report being seduced by her. She appears as an irresistibly beautiful woman and initiates sexual relations. Following this encounter, she demands that the man remain celibate, or, in some versions, that he never have sexual relations with another woman. The man may appear to have a wife and family, but if Mami Wata is his true spiritual spouse, he can never consummate his marriage or father children. The psychologist Ronald Wintraub, studying Mami Wata beliefs in Liberia in the 1960s, noted that some male patients experiencing psychotic episodes revealed elaborate delusion systems centered on being married to Mami Wata and the impossible demands this placed on their earthly lives. In some traditions, the requirement extends beyond the devotee himself to his family. Accepting wealth from Mami Wata might require that one's children never marry or that a family line end. The prosperity she grants is sometimes described as coming at the cost of fertility. Your business may thrive, but your family will not grow. This represents a profound spiritual dilemma. The individual benefits while the family and community suffer. Such bargains reveal anxieties about the atomizing effects of capitalism, how the pursuit of individual wealth can fracture traditional communal bonds and obligations. Female devotees face different but equally demanding covenants. Women who dedicate themselves to Mami Wata may be required to remain celibate, to avoid marriage and children entirely in order to serve as her priestesses. Others may be permitted to marry, but face restrictions on their sexual behavior, required to maintain ritual purity through periodic abstinence. The rewards for female devotees often include spiritual powers, the ability to divine the future, to heal illnesses, both physical and psychological, to mediate between the human and spirit worlds. Women priestesses of Mami Wata often attain significant social status and authority within their communities, wielding power that patriarchal norms might otherwise deny them. The most terrifying aspect of the Mami Wata covenant is what happens when it is violated. Stories throughout Africa tell of devotees who broke their vows, men who slept with women despite their promise to Mami Wata, women who violated taboos, families who neglected to make required offerings. The punishments are severe. Sudden illness that no medicine can cure, business failure and bankruptcy, madness, death by drowning, or the deaths of family members. Mami Wata is described as intensely jealous, as demanding absolute loyalty. Like water itself, she can nurture life or bring death, and those who disrespect her discover her destructive power. Yet devotees continue to seek her favor despite these risks. The potential rewards, wealth, beauty, spiritual insight, healing power, prove irresistible even in the face of her dangerous demands. This willingness to enter into potentially hazardous spiritual contracts reflects broader patterns in African religious practice, where deities are not assumed to be purely benevolent and where humans negotiate with spiritual forces rather than simply submitting to them. Mami Wata embodies both the opportunities and the dangers of engaging with power, whether spiritual, economic, or social. The worship of Mami Wata finds expression in elaborate ceremonial practices that vary across regions, but share certain core elements. These rituals represent some of the most vibrant and viscerally powerful spiritual performances in African religious life. Combining music, dance, visual spectacle, and altered states of consciousness to forge direct connections between the human and divine realms. Ceremonies typically occur near bodies of water, on riverbanks, beside lakes, along coastal beaches, spaces understood as liminal zones where the spiritual and physical worlds overlap. Water is not merely symbolic in these rituals, but actively present, sometimes with devotees wading into rivers or waves as part of the ceremony. Altars and shrines dedicated to Mami Wata feature prominently, decorated with the objects associated with her: mirrors, combs, perfume bottles, images from the iconic snake charmer poster, Hindu prints, candles, flowers, and offerings of food and drink. White clothing is prescribed for participants in many traditions. Devotees dress entirely in white, sometimes with red accents, reflecting Mami Wata's signature colors. This white garments serve multiple functions. They symbolize purity and spiritual openness. They visually unify the assembled worshippers, and they mark participants as being in a special ritual state, temporarily removed from ordinary social roles and responsibilities. Before ceremonies, careful attention is paid to cleanliness, both personal hygiene and the purification of ritual spaces. Mami Wata is said to be extremely fastidious, and filthy surroundings or unwashed bodies can offend her and cause her to withdraw her presence. Music drives the ceremonies forward. Drummers, sometimes accompanied by guitars, bells, and other instruments, create complex rhythmic patterns that build in intensity throughout the ritual. The music is not mere accompaniment, but an active force that calls Mami Wata, that opens pathways for spiritual entities to enter the physical world. Songs praising Mami Wata, recounting her myths, and requesting her blessings are sung by the assembled devotees, often led by initiated priestesses or priests. Dance is equally essential. Participants move with increasing intensity as the ceremony progresses, their movements sometimes mimicking water, flowing, undulating, rising and falling like waves. The dance serves to exhaust the rational mind, to override everyday consciousness and open the dancer to possession by spiritual forces. Witnesses describe dancers moving with extraordinary energy for hours, their faces transformed, their eyes distant, their movements no longer consciously controlled. When possession occurs, when Mami Wata or one of her spiritual attendants enters a devotee, the transformation is dramatic. The possessed individual's entire demeanor changes. If Mami Wata herself possesses someone, that person begins to move with exaggerated feminine grace, to adopt seductive postures and expressions, to demand perfume and mirrors. Possessed devotees sometimes drink perfume directly from the bottle, powder their faces and breasts with talcum powder, and speak in voices different from their normal speech, often issuing prophecies, advice, or demands for offerings. Unlike the stern, frightening possessions by some spirits in African traditions, possession by Mami Wata is often described as joyful, even playful. She allows her devotees to laugh, to enjoy themselves, to experience pleasure during her ceremonies. This aspect of her worship has sometimes caused mainstream religious authorities, both Christian and Muslim, to view Mami Wata practices with suspicion, seeing in them dangerous sensuality and uncontrolled emotion. But for devotees, this joyfulness is part of Mami Wata's blessing, a reminder that spirituality need not always be solemn and restrictive. Along the coastal regions of Benin, Ghana, and Togo, an elaborate hierarchical priesthood serves Mami Wata. This is not informal or individual worship, but an organized religious structure with clearly defined roles, initiation procedures, training requirements, and lines of authority. High priests and priestesses oversee multiple shrines, train new initiates, officiate at major ceremonies, and serve as intermediaries when individuals seek Mami Wata's intervention for healing or guidance. In February 2020, in the city of Cotonou, Benin, Haunan Behumbeza was officially appointed the Supreme Chief of Mami Wata in a ceremony attended by hundreds of priests from throughout the region, covered by local television news and newspapers, and attended by Benin's Minister of Culture. This event, far from being marginal or hidden, demonstrated Mami Wata's continued significance in contemporary West African religious and even political life. Initiation into Mami Wata priesthood involves extended periods of training, learning ritual protocols, mastering trance techniques, memorizing praise songs and prayers, and undergoing symbolic death and rebirth. Coming out ceremonies, when new initiates are publicly presented to the community, feature elaborate costuming, ritual cleansing, and displays of the spiritual powers the initiates have acquired. These events function as both religious rituals and social celebrations, reinforcing community bonds and traditional spiritual practices in the face of modernization and competing religious influences. The Atlantic slave trade represents one of history's greatest horrors. Millions of Africans forcibly torn from their homelands, subjected to unimaginable brutality during the Middle Passage, and enslaved in the Americas under conditions designed to strip away their humanity, their cultures, and their spiritual traditions. Yet despite centuries of violence aimed at cultural erasure, African spiritual practices survived, adapted, and in some cases thrived in diaspora communities. Mami Wata's journey across the Atlantic demonstrates both the resilience of African religious traditions and their remarkable capacity for transformation. Enslaved Africans who had worshipped water spirits in their homelands carried these beliefs with them. During the Middle Passage itself, when captives were crammed into ship holds in conditions that killed perhaps a quarter of those being transported, some found psychological survival in spiritual belief. Stories circulated among the enslaved that Mami Wata, or other water spirits, sometimes capsized slave ships, drowning captives but freeing their spirits to return home across the ocean. Whether understood literally or metaphorically, such beliefs provided meaning amid senseless suffering. In Suriname, which received approximately 241,000 enslaved Africans between 1668 and 1830, scholars have documented the evolution of what came to be called Wachramama. The first recorded mention appears in the 1740s, describing a spirit that ordered enslaved people not to work on certain days and instead make offerings. By the 1770s, colonial authorities had banned Wachramama dances, recognizing them as sites of cultural resistance and autonomous spiritual practice. The memoirs of British-Dutch soldier John Gabriel Stedman suggest that by the late 18th century, West African water spirit beliefs had begun merging with indigenous Amerindian beliefs, creating a new syncretic form. Wachramama became incorporated into Winti, a Surinamese religion combining beliefs from enslaved Akan and Fon peoples with Christianity. Colonial authorities banned Winti practice from 1874 to 1971,
but the religion survived underground and has experienced revival in recent decades. In contemporary Suriname, Watra Mama Mami Wata remains an important spiritual entity, and traditional songs like I Sa Si from the Samaka Maroon people have been remixed by contemporary artists and become popular throughout the Caribbean.
In Haiti, Mami Wata merged with Vodou spiritual traditions, manifesting as La Sirène, a powerful Loa or spiritual entity associated with the ocean. La Sirène appears as a mermaid and is often paired with Agwe, the male spirit of the sea. Haitian Vodou, despite centuries of persecution under French colonial rule and continuing stigmatization, developed into a sophisticated religious system with elaborate theology, ritual practice, and artistic expression. Vodou temples feature glittering sequin flags depicting La Sirène, sculpture, and paintings that show her simultaneously as African mermaid goddess and syncretized with Catholic saints, particularly Our Lady of Charity.
In Brazil, Mami Wata finds parallels in Iemanjá, the Yoruba-derived Orisha of the ocean in Candomblé and Umbanda traditions. While Iemanjá's roots lie in Yoruba religion, rather than specifically in Mami Wata worship, the two figures share remarkable similarities. Both are powerful female water spirits associated with fertility, motherhood, wealth, and the sea. Brazilians by the millions gather on beaches each New Year's Eve to honor Iemanjá, wading into the waves with offerings of flowers, perfume, mirrors, and jewelry. Precisely the items associated with Mami Wata across the Atlantic. The convergence suggests deep structural patterns in how African diaspora communities conceptualize and relate to water spirits.
In the United States, particularly among Gullah and Geechee communities in the coastal regions of South Carolina and Georgia, African water spirit beliefs persisted despite the brutal suppression of African cultural practices under slavery. These communities, whose relative geographical isolation allowed them to maintain more African cultural elements than enslaved populations elsewhere in North America, preserved stories of mermaids and water spirits that closely parallel West African traditions. Contemporary African American communities have increasingly reclaimed Mami Wata as part of reconnecting with ancestral spiritual traditions, with temples and shrines appearing in cities like New Orleans, Miami, and New York. What unites these diaspora manifestations is their function as sites of cultural memory and resistance. Worshipping Mami Wata, or her equivalents, represented a refusal to have one's spiritual life completely dictated by enslavers' Christianity. It maintained connection to African homelands and cultural identity, even when all other aspects of African life had been forcibly stripped away. The adaptability of Mami Wata traditions, their ability to incorporate new elements while maintaining core characteristics, proved essential to their survival. By syncretizing with Catholicism, indigenous beliefs, and other influences, these traditions became harder for authorities to identify and suppress while remaining spiritually meaningful to practitioners. In contemporary Africa, Mami Wata finds herself at the center of religious and cultural conflicts that reflect broader tensions between tradition and modernity, between indigenous African spirituality and imported religions, between those who embrace cultural syncretism and those who demand religious purity. These battles are being waged not just in temples and churches, but in mass media, popular culture, and everyday conversations about national identity and spiritual authenticity. Pentecostal Christianity, which has experienced explosive growth across Africa since the 1970s, has positioned Mami Wata as a primary demonic enemy. Pentecostal pastors preach sermons identifying Mami Wata as a marine spirit, a demon who pretends to offer blessings but actually enslaves souls, destroys families, and prevents people from accepting salvation through Jesus Christ. In this theological framework, any prosperity gained through Mami Wata worship is false wealth, spiritually contaminated, and ultimately destructive. The celibacy requirements she imposes on male devotees become evidence of her demonic nature, preventing reproduction and family formation that Christianity celebrates. Deliverance ministries specialize in exorcising Mami Wata spirits from those supposedly possessed or spiritually married to her. These exorcisms can be violent and psychologically traumatic, with pastors engaging in hours-long rituals involving shouting, physical restraint, and intense pressure on the afflicted person to renounce their spiritual connections. Former Mami Wata devotees who convert to Pentecostalism often appear in testimonials, describing their previous spiritual practices as demonic bondage and their conversion as liberation. Yet anthropologists studying these testimonials note that the narrative structures often follow formulaic patterns provided by the churches themselves, raising questions about the extent to which these represent authentic experiences versus performances of expected conversion narratives. Islam, which has been present in parts of Africa for more than 1,000 years, takes a similarly hostile stance toward Mami Wata worship, viewing it as shirk, the cardinal sin of associating partners with Allah. While Islamic theology accepts the existence of jinn, spiritual entities that can interact with humans, traditional Mami Wata worship practices are considered incompatible with Islamic monotheism. Yet, as with Christianity, some syncretism has occurred, particularly in coastal West African Muslim communities, where water spirit beliefs preceded the arrival of Islam. Some Muslims reinterpret Mami Wata as a particularly powerful jinn, rather than abandoning belief in her entirely. Ghana's horror film industry, often called Gallywood, has produced numerous movies depicting Mami Wata as a terrifying figure who destroys lives. These low-budget but culturally influential films typically follow similar plots. A person desperate for wealth makes a bargain with Mami Wata, experiences temporary success, but then watches in horror as the spiritual consequences destroy their family, health, and sanity. The films often conclude with Christian deliverance, positioning Pentecostal faith as the only escape from Mami Wata's clutches. These movies reach vast audiences through Nigeria's massive film distribution networks, and increasingly through online platforms, shaping how younger, more urbanized Africans understand traditional spiritual practices. Yet, despite this sustained opposition from both Christianity and Islam, Mami Wata worship persists. In fact, scholars have documented its continued growth and adaptation. Why does she remain compelling despite being demonized by the continent's dominant religions? Several factors explain her resilience. First, Mami Wata addresses needs that Christianity and Islam may not fully satisfy for some practitioners. Those facing desperate economic circumstances, those seeking healing for conditions that biomedicine cannot cure, those wanting spiritual experiences more direct and immediate than what mainstream religions offer, these individuals continue to seek out Mami Wata priests and priestesses. Her promise of material prosperity particularly resonates in contexts of extreme economic inequality and limited opportunities for advancement through conventional means. Second, defending Mami Wata has become entangled with assertions of African cultural identity and resistance to what some view as religious imperialism. Christianity and Islam both arrived in Africa through processes connected to colonialism, slavery, and foreign domination. Reclaiming indigenous spiritual practices like Mami Wata worship represents cultural decolonization, a refusal to accept that everything African must be abandoned in favor of imported religions. Pan-Africanist movements and Afrocentric communities, both in Africa and the diaspora, have embraced Mami Wata as a symbol of authentic African spirituality. Third, Mami Wata's very adaptability and capacity for syncretism protect her. She has proven capable of existing alongside Christianity and Islam for some practitioners,
who do not necessarily see a complete contradiction. Some individuals maintain both practices, attending church or mosque while also consulting Mami Wata priests during crises. Others create new syncretic forms, understanding Mami Wata through Christian or Islamic theological frameworks. This theological flexibility frustrates religious authorities seeking clear doctrinal boundaries, but serves practitioners who navigate complex spiritual landscapes.
A battle over Mami Wata ultimately reflects deeper questions about African modernity.
Must modernization require abandoning all pre-colonial traditions?
Can African societies be both modern and traditionally African?
Is cultural change inevitably a zero-sum game where indigenous practices must die so imported ones can thrive? Mami Wata's persistence suggests that may Africans answer these questions differently than religious authorities might prefer, creating hybrid modernities that incorporate multiple spiritual sources.
Standing at the edge of the Atlantic, where West African coastlines meet the ocean that both connects and separates continents, one can understand why Mami Wata has proven so enduring. She is like water itself, impossible to grasp, taking whatever shape the container provides, essential to life, yet capable of bringing death, transparent, yet concealing unfathomable depths. Her story reveals profound truths about how cultures evolve. She demonstrates that traditions are not static, frozen artifacts from the past, but living processes that continuously absorb, adapt, and transform. The journey from ancient Namo myths to German circus posters to Indian calendar prints to contemporary African temples illustrates that cultural authenticity does not require unchanging purity. Rather, cultures survive precisely through their ability to integrate new elements while maintaining essential characteristics and meanings.
Mami Wata also illuminates how people navigate rapid social change. The period of her most dramatic transformation, the late 19th through mid-20th centuries, coincided with Africa's most traumatic upheavals, the final devastations of the slave trade, European colonial conquest and exploitation, forced integration into global capitalism, Christian and Islamic missionary campaigns, world wars, independence movements, and post-colonial struggles. In the face of such overwhelming change, Mami Wata provided continuity with the past while also making sense of new realities. She was simultaneously ancient and modern, African and global, traditional and adaptive.
Her dual nature speaks to fundamental human experiences of power, desire, and consequence. Life presents us with opportunities that carry risks. Prosperity often requires sacrifices. Beauty can be dangerous. Foreignness holds both threat and attraction. These universal themes, expressed through the specific cultural language of African water spirit traditions, give Mami Wata cross-cultural resonance. Her appeal extends beyond Africa, not because she is universal in some abstract sense, but because the human dilemmas she embodies are broadly recognizable, even as her specific manifestations remain culturally rooted.
For women, Mami Wata offers particularly complex possibilities. In patriarchal societies that often limit women's authority and autonomy, becoming a Mami Wata priestess provides a path to power, respect, and independence. Female devotees can claim spiritual authority that supersedes male social dominance. Yet this power comes with costs, often celibacy, separation from conventional family structures, and potential social marginalization. Mami Wata thus represents both liberation and limitation, offering women alternatives to prescribed roles while simultaneously imposing her own demanding requirements. The aesthetic dimension of Mami Wata worship deserves recognition. Her rituals are not merely functional, but beautiful. The white and red clothing, the glittering altars covered in mirrors and perfume bottles, the chromolithographs with their vibrant colors, the carved wooden figures, the music and dance, This emphasis on beauty, pleasure, and sensory richness stands in notable contrast to the ascetic, anti-material tendencies in some religious traditions. Mami Wata worship celebrates the body, ornamentation, wealth, and enjoyment, refusing the assumption that spirituality requires renunciation of worldly pleasures.
Her continued relevance in the 21st century surprises some observers who assumed that African traditional religions would inevitably decline as education increased and modernity advanced. But this assumption reflected colonialist prejudices that equated African traditions with backwardness and assumed Western-style secularization was inevitable everywhere. Instead, what we see with Mami Wata is selective modernization. The use of social media to organize ceremonies, the incorporation of contemporary music and fashion, the engagement with global diaspora networks, all while maintaining core ritual practices and beliefs. Mami Wata worshippers are not living fossils performing ancient rites unchanged since prehistory, but creative religious actors generating meaningful contemporary practice. As environmental concerns become increasingly urgent, water spirits like Mami Wata may gain new significance. Communities that understand rivers, lakes, and oceans as inhabited by powerful spiritual entities may prove more motivated to protect these waters than those who view them as mere resources. Some environmental activists have begun partnering with traditional religious communities, recognizing that spiritual beliefs can foster conservation when scientific arguments fail to motivate behavior change. Whether Mami Wata will become an environmental guardian remains to be seen, but her intimate connection to water positions her for such a role. The mystery at the heart of Mami Wata's appeal cannot be completely explained through social scientific analysis. For her devotees, she is not merely a symbol or cultural construct, but a real spiritual entity who intervenes in their lives, who possesses them during ceremonies, who grants blessings and inflicts punishments, who appears in visions and dreams. Any account that reduces her to purely social or psychological functions misses what makes her genuinely powerful for believers. Scholarly understanding and devotional experience represent different ways of knowing, both valid within their domains, but not fully translatable into each other. What we can say with certainty is that Mami Wata has earned her place among the world's significant spiritual figures. She has survived the Middle Passage, colonialism, cultural suppression, religious persecution, and modernization. She has absorbed influences from Samoan performers, Hindu goddesses, European colonial imagery, and contemporary capitalism while remaining recognizably herself. She continues to attract devotees, inspire artists, and provoke both devotion and controversy across multiple continents. Whatever the future holds, Mami Wata will likely remain a significant presence in African and African diaspora spiritual life, adapting as she always has to new circumstances while maintaining her essential character as Mother Water. Beautiful, dangerous, foreign yet familiar, demanding yet generous, as eternal and ever-changing as the waters she rules.